locksmithing has been the trade of my family for I don't even know how many generations. I have been working as one since I was a kid, helping my father and grandfather. I learned all the secrets and methods of the job, studied how to install, break, assemble, and disassemble all kinds of locks. I could easily disassemble the lock of a bank vault if given the right tools, money, and a legal permit. I have unlocked hundreds of doors and cars, installed hundreds of new locks, fabricated thousands of keys, and take pride in saying, I have never, ever used my knowledge for criminal ends, as so many locksmiths in my region secretly do. I have successfully and financially sustained myself and my family with locksmithing for almost 30 years. And yet, I'm closing my workshop tomorrow and already signing the documents to work with my wife in her bakery. The reason that made me quit locksmithing is simple. I can't do it anymore after my last job. I tried. I really did. But after that fateful assignment 6 months ago, I realized that it's not for me anymore. We locksmiths know how to deal with stuff we were not supposed to see. Our work is about locking places. Sometimes this is about keeping things in, and sometimes about keeping things out. Locksmithing's almost synonymous with security and privacy. But it's hard to keep something so perspective-changing to yourself. So, I decided to write it down. One day, maybe I'll have enough courage to share it to my family, or even the world. I don't know. I have not even decided what fake story I will using to explain my abandonment of the locksmithing business to all my former clients and acquaintances. Well, let's go back to the beginning. 6 months ago, I was called by Greg Becker to unlock a locked door in his property. Now, Greg Becker has never been a popular or particularly well-respected nat. He is in his late 70s. And since I was a child, I heard rumors about his weird occultist practices. Unsubstantiated rumors, I thought, until Greg called me urgently at 2 a.m., saying he needed help getting into his house. I was already sleeping, and the phone woke me up. I tried to dissuade him, saying my prices in the graveyard hours were exorbitantly higher than in daytime hours. But the old man was adamant, claiming it was an emergency. I dressed up, packed my tools, apologized for my wife for leaving in the middle of the night like this, entered my pickup, and drove to his property. Well, old Greg Becker had a pretty house, albeit a big rustic. It was located at the edge of town, almost in the rural zone. I parked my vehicle there and exited it. Greg Becker was on his porch, carrying a lamplight. Yet I could clearly see that the door of his house was open. I angrily questioned him why he didn't call me to tell he had already found a way in, but he evasively replied that he actually needed me for something else. More often than not, that means trouble. So I was already going back to my car when he offered $1,000. That was what I made in an entire week of hard work, so I couldn't refuse. I followed Greg cautiously through the overgrown grass to a barn located a couple hundred yards behind his house. If the old man's house was rustic, then the barn was outright decrepit. The wooden structure seemed like it had been there for decades, without any repairs or restorations. There was no paint, and the whole thing was falling apart. He pointed the lamplight at the entrance of the barn, and I immediately saw how it stood out from the rest of the building. It looked more like the entrance to a bank vault than a quasi-abandoned barn. Hell, I had seen bank vaults that were easier to break into than that barn. I tried questioning him what that was, but Greg refused answering me. I said it would be easier to break the wall, which was already falling apart, but he reminded me about the $1,000. Well, Beggars can't be choosers. I asked if he could at least bring me something I could sit on, as this would take a while. This time, he complied, and a few minutes later, I had already set up my stuff on the ground and was working. It wasn't easy. It was dark, and I was sleepy. I asked for a coffee, and Greg simply left me there and disappeared into his house. At first I thought he was making one for me, but after 40 minutes, I realized the jerkass had probably gone to sleep. That door had 100 different locks. 100 different locks. That meant that crazy old man had to carry 100 different keys. The more I thought about it, the less sense it all made. The door was clearly new, impeccably clean, even if everything around was old and falling apart. After a handful of hours, the sun was rising, yet I had only unlocked 5 locks. Whoever built that door was either a perfectionist or a psychopath, or both. Greg Becker appeared, wearing pajamas and carrying 2 cups of steamy coffee. I asked him where the fuck he was, and he just casually said he went for a nap. I was furious by that point, so I stood up and told him that if he wanted someone to open that door, he needed to at least show some fucking respect. The old man sneered at me and just said, $5,000. I was starting to doubt him, so I demanded that he paid me half first. Greg went inside the house and came back with an envelope full of money. I started working back on the door right away. The worst part was not the unending locks, the disrespectful client, the mysteries surrounding that entrance, or the scalding hot sun on the sky. It was the maddening boredom of it all. Becker refused to talk to me because he said the job demanded discretion. There was no sound whatsoever, and my phone had no signal. I didn't even know how he managed to call me there. I hadn't picked a signal ever since my car drove into that street. I didn't even have a watch, so the sole indicator of the time was the position of the sun. Around 2 in the afternoon, I had unlocked 17 locks. Greg Becker appeared to check on my progress, and I told him I was starving, and that I needed to go home to rest a little bit. Greg wasn't happy, but he said that he needed me, so he just asked that I was back before midnight. I went home. My wife was pissed, but after I'd shown her the money, she reluctantly agreed to let me keep working on Becker's door. I didn't sleep well that afternoon. I kept having these weird dreams about Becker years younger, carrying lots of bloody plastic bags into the barn. In the end of the dream, I saw myself opening the door, only for him to appear behind me and beat me to death with a baseball bat. The nightmares were unnerving, but I attributed them to stress. At 6 p.m., I was back on Greg Becker's property, but that time, I brought 20 hours of downloaded podcasts. Greg handed me a cup of coffee, his lamplight, and said he'd check up on me on the morning.